And-
ask
and-
them to.
That's what it's saying. I'm gonna assume that it is in as a senior manager. which
We
is-
are officially recording, just to let you guys know, and live streaming.
Thank you.
So whenever you are ready.
I think, Mr. Watts, this is your show.
Yeah. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it is 4:36 PM and this is the Children's Services Council of Leon County Executive Committee meeting for today, Thursday, December 5th. And with that, we will call to order this discussion,
I'll do the roll call.
please.
Awesome. Mr. Paul Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Watts,
Here.
Chair Jones. Mr. Jones. Let the record reflect he is.
Yes,
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. And I believe we need a
Yeah,
motion.
I'm gonna make a motion, Mr. Chair, that will allow, it is the role of the Children's Services Council that we can allow a member of the council to attend via Zoom or telephonically if we have a quorum present, physical quorum present, and there are exceptional circumstances under which the council member is unable to attend. Both actually are true for this meeting. And so I would like to move that we allow Mr. Jones to attend the meeting and be able to vote telephonically.
Second. So.
Okay. So
Yes.
without objection. Yeah.
Okay, so good to have you, Mr. Jones, and we will move forward with the agenda. Next item is approval of the agenda.
I'll move the agenda.
Second. Okay, all right, and do we have any general public comment?
There is no general public comment.
No general public comment. Okay, so next up, we will be discussing the executive director's performance evaluation. There should be in our packets a summary of the evaluation from the council, and we can engage as far as performance evaluation and determination of plan of action to discuss with the executive director. I don't know, do we have a report out from Mr. Rowe? Okay. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, sir. So the executive director's employment agreement with CSC Leon provides that every year she will receive a formal evaluation of her performance. The evaluation is conducted by each individual member of the governing council utilizing a form that is reflective of the job description by which she was originally engaged. I sent the form to each governing council member in October. Each governing council member returned the completed form to me in timely fashion. I tabulated the results of each scoring, which uses basically for each of the 5 categories, it's a scaling of 1 to 5. I tabulated the scores as well as the comments that were provided to the performance evaluation, and you should have that in your packet. Also, for convenience of the committee, I included a summary and tabulation of the 2023 performance evaluation, just so that you could see how the scoring, how the performance compared to her last annual evaluation. And that 2023 tabulation is included as the last page under the table.
Okay, thank you very much. So we can, first of all, I just want to check, did we lose Mr. Jones at this video?
no, I'm here.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. I just wanted to check.
He just turned his
I was
camera off.
expecting, okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so we can go ahead and open up if we want to have any discussions around the evaluation. Did anyone have any comments, questions before we move into establishing? I think we had agreed that the chair would meet with the executive director to go over the evaluation. So let's just start there. Any questions or comments on the evaluations that were tabulated and completed?
I don't have any questions. Mr. Rowe, in terms of, as we look at this year's evaluation versus last year's and the previous year, where are we in terms of scores?
So the scoring, as the committee members know, was conducted by some new members this year.
Right.
There were new members on the board who did not participate in last year's evaluation on the board. The scoring overall is perhaps a little bit lower as far as the numerical assignments.
Right.
Each board.
The average, you mean?
The average,
Right.
right? So the averages are included here for each of the categories. For instance, in planning, the average score across all 9 of the governing council members was 3.67, whereas last year it was 3.88. And you can put that on it scales to 100, so you could basically determine how much of a change there has been since last year. But
And not sure if that factors, but there were 8, there were 8 last year and 9 this year that completed the.
Yes, sir, that is right.
Although this is an average.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm sorry, and I did not see in the backup last year's. I do see the comparison. I didn't ask you that question to put you on the record. I was just trying to see the difference myself, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. And I think one of our policies comments were not necessary unless there was a 2 or lower. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's right. Basically, scores of 2 or lower are indicative of generally it needs improvement.
Mhm.
And so as a matter of policy, we have asked each governing council member that if they're inclined to give a 2 or a 1 score, that they provide feedback to the executive director through their comments so that the executive director can undertake efforts to improve those categories and address the concern that led to the score of the 2 or the 1. There was only 1 of those this year.
And Mr. Roy, I don't think it's in our policy for evaluations, but with that particular 2 item, and as you indicated, something that you would want to work on, technically, there's no mechanism in place where we would automatically create some type of plan to address that too. It's just a free-for-all, pretty much, right?
That's right. That's right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so if Mr. Jones, you have the task of sitting down with Sika and going over the evaluation, which, basically with the one exception, although I think Ms. Marsteller makes some really good points in that one needs improvement area. And I was vacillating between a 3 and 2. Again, for some of the same reasons that Ms. Marsteller mentions. I think that as a whole, that you look at the 9 members of the council, everyone is, based on their scores, is saying she's meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. As it relates to the planning function and Ms. Marsteller's comments, I would echo those comments, and I don't know that I put it squarely all on Sika, but the buck stops at the top, and so I do think it's important that she take a look at those comments. I know she will, and perhaps with you, Mr. Jones, talk about a plan so that when we're having this conversation next year, we can say, here's how she chose to address it, and here's how we've moved the needle in the right direction. Would you be up for that, Mr. Jones?
Up to it?
Well, I know you're up to it. So are you good with that?
I too have taken note of the comments, and I too would agree with much of what has been described. But I do also agree that it's not entirely on the director, because some of these observations are really observations of the board and its work. And I think that in the summary of evaluations and comments, talking with the director, a plan of action to respond, no different, like kind of like what we would do in an audit, you know? When you have exceptions, you then come back with a corrective plan. I think that every observation that is a criticism deserves a response and a plan of action moving forward. And that would be the nature of my conversation with Mrs. Green.
Great. The only other point, Mr. Chair, that I would make is, I know there's some discussion on compensation and the actual annual salary compensation, but also consideration of a vehicle allowance.
May I, is this connected to the evaluation?
Oh, okay, sorry.
That might be the next agenda item.
Yeah, my bad.
Are you, so this, okay, so,
It's not.
so I think we agreed that Chair Jones, as far as the evaluation, there's a plan of action to meet with Sika and discuss and to respond.
Right.
X, Y, and Z. So is there any more discussion or comments on the evaluation piece before we move on to the next item, which will include the request that we received from Mr. Rowe?
The only other thing that I would add to my discussion, friends, is that it also provides an opportunity for the director to engage more with those board members, particularly Ms. Marstiller being a new board member. I think that the scores are indicative. It provides opportunity for greater engagement. And that would also be a part of my discussion with the director, particularly with our two newest board members.
Mr. Jones, maybe in your discussion, I'll tell you on all the boards that I sit on, the executive director meets one-on-one with all of the board members on an annual basis. And so while I think it's important that, you know, with Mr. Johnson and Ms. Marsteller, that Mrs. Green does meet with both of them, it's probably a good idea that she find time to meet with, you know, all of the board members. And, you know,
if that is not occurring, I wasn't aware that wasn't occurring, because I noted it, and maybe. Oh, but yes, that'll be a part of my recommendations.
Fantastic.
Okay.
But certainly there's opportunity to create more engagement, particularly in lieu of what we see here in the numbers, right? If it were me, that would be my response. Everyone, but certainly those who require more attention and information such that they can be duly informed.
All right, so we will move on to that. And what I wanted to do was just confirm with Mr. Rowe, did you want to present on the request from the executive director around the, okay.
Yes, sir. The existing employment contract for the executive director was entered into for a 2-year term that is reaching the end. It's basically good through December 31st of 2024, such that it's time now to for the governing council to approve a renewal. Presumably that would likewise cover a new 2-year term, 2025 and 2026. As part of the renewal agreement process, the executive director has shared with me a couple of requests that she would like to be considered for. One of which is basically a salary increase. The second is that she would like to have an allowance for her travel expenses. She travels on behalf of CSC Leon, primarily within the county, fairly extensively every month, and would like to have some sort of an allowance to reimburse her for the expenses she incurs in conducting that travel. So what I have done is I have prepared for executive committee meeting consideration a red line of the existing contract compared to the new renewal contract I drafted which includes text addressing those concerns. Of course, it is up to the full governing council to determine whether or not either of those considerations are granted. I've prepared it and submitted it here for the executive committee because I know the executive committee will consider them and then make its own recommendation to the full governing council at the meeting to be conducted 1 week from today. So 2 weeks from today. So that's what you see. You should have in your packet, I hope, the red line, and
Yes.
I have additional copies here. And you can see primarily the changes are changing the dates, but it does contain a blank for what her salary would be. It is currently $128,750, and there's a new provision in 10A which would give her a monthly allowance for travel expenses. Again, this is just text that I drafted based on her request so that it could be presented to and considered by the committee and ultimately the full governing council.
Okay, thank you for that report out. And Mr. Mitchell, I'll let you go ahead and start with your comments.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rowe, two quick questions. I'll start with the travel reimbursement or the monthly allowance for vehicle. I read the explanation that she's using her car, she pays for insurance, gas, tires, repair, all that. Does the DMS rule allow for a state employee to receive mileage within the county in which they work?
As far as I know, it does.
Okay.
She is traveling on business on behalf of CSC Leon, so she couldn't be reimbursed for it.
Okay, so here, this is my take on this. Each member of the council drives to and from meetings that have nothing to do with our daily life, and we don't ask or seek reimbursement for mileage. I think in previous meetings, I've mentioned that as a senior manager in state government, which is the way that we've qualified Mrs. Green's employment, I never once saw it, although I did have the ability to seek reimbursement if I traveled and within Leon County, and I did on a daily basis. I think the idea of a vehicle allowance is probably not a good idea. If I was comfortable with something, it would be, I think when we drove out to Fort Braden, for example, Fort Braden's quite a hike to and from. Let's say that's round trip 38 miles. I'm making it up, but it's pretty close. Let's say 36 to 38 miles. The state allowance, I think right now is 52 cents a mile. It's somewhere in that ballpark. Let's say, just because make it easy on my math, let's say it's 50 cents. I think it's a little more, but let's just say it's 50 cents for those 38 miles. And that is based on all of the things that Mrs. Green listed. That would be a $19 reimbursement. I would be very comfortable with exceptional mileage, driving from here to the county commission. I see that within her daily duties. That's just my take on it. And so I would much rather she bill us for exceptional mileage and not a flat fee every month. Yeah.
Let me add to that. I'm sorry, I submitted it late. So I have the time to do research on it, but I did submit and Holly was kind enough to print it out. But we have a travel policy that we voted on. I went back and looked at it. And that travel policy that's for all staff and includes the executive director and includes even the board members or whatnot. And really, I propose that we follow that policy that we already voted on and agreed on, which does modeled after Florida statute. I think it's 44.5 cents a mile, somewhere along there, but we created a log sheet for them to track the mileage and where it may be of inconvenience to some. I think that a person should be able, if they choose, to claim reimbursement for mileage that, they follow the policy that we have. And then I know from the attachments that were sent, even with the comparison of some of the folks that had the $300 allowance, I've tried to look and just see comparable those counties, what that coverage area is. So anyway, I think we should just follow the policy we have. It's there, it's approved. Because let's say somebody doesn't travel at all that month, then, we've given them an allowance.
Yeah.
I think you should use the policy that we have. And as far as the wear and tear on a vehicle, I believe that, some would propose that mileage reimbursement rate takes that into consideration, in that factoring. The only other, I work for state government, so I know that I am allowed, if I choose, to claim mileage if I were to drive here, right? Okay. I think there's only a certain category in statute, which might be like child protective investigators from my realm, that I know use their vehicle extremely daily, and there's like 2 times a year of a reimbursement for its like insurance wear and tear, because it is significant, use of your vehicle. But I'm not aware of any other divisions. So anyway, that's my take on the travel request, is that we follow the policy we already have.
And I would be very comfortable with that, Mr. Watts. Mr. Jones.
I know you can't see him, but he is still with us.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, did you have
I
any?
agree with you, Mr. Watts.
Okay.
And that, and whatever that amount is, and then if there's reimbursement to be claimed by staff, then all of that stuff would come to us in as a part of the financial reimbursement process also outlined in the policy. I'm fine with that.
And that policy right now is it gets submitted to Dina and approved by the chair, right? Or is there just some?
I can't imagine that the chairman of the board would
Okay.
have to
Well,
provide
when you said
reimbursement.
bring it to us, I was like, God, I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I can imagine that the director does that, and the approval from the board would be signing off on the reimbursement itself.
But you wouldn't want the director signing off on the director, so.
No, but it would
chair.
still come to the chair as a part of the financial documents that I sign off on as a part of the reimbursement.
That was my point. Okay.
Yeah.
We're saying the same thing. I'm just not, I didn't get a good night's sleep last night, so I apologize.
You should have been in a Holiday Inn Express.
I should.
One of the committee members had asked whether or not Sika had an estimate as to the monthly travel expenses she incurs. She does not currently keep track of mileage, though she did for the first 10 months of her employment. During that time, we had not yet established these offices. She was, and staff were largely making use of my law firm's office in Killearn. She said that it averaged then about $200 a month. The highest month was $350. That based on the mileage at the state rate. She said that shortly after moving into the office, she realized that she thought perhaps the monthly travel would diminish a little bit because of the central location of the office. She said that actually that hasn't been the case. She's traveling about as much as she. And although she was able to and did submit reimbursement based on the mileage rate at the time, the concern she expressed was it's oftentimes difficult to do it short of keeping some sort of a clipboard or the reimbursement log there in her car. Plus, it does.
Well, there are apps. There are apps that manage that now, if I'm not mistaken. So it's easily rectified, right? I mean, it may be somewhat cumbersome, but I think what the vice chair describes is the most fair process to do. And I think it can, like I said, I believe there are apps that do that for you now. or you click it on once you start your professional travel, you click it off when it's over. So, or, so I think it can be easily managed. It might be cumbersome, but I think it's the most equitable way to do it. And it keeps us in line with our own policy.
Very good. So I will revise that section of the renewal employment agreement to move from a monthly allotment to provide that she can claim reimbursement for her in-county travel expenses based on the state mileage rate.
Right.
Is that what we will then bring forward to the full governing council for approval?
But isn't that already, to Mr. Watts's point, a policy that we have? Is she not included under that
The
policy?
agreement as written, it currently, the only travel it really addresses if she is attending conferences out of the area.
Okay.
And then she basically has to seek chair approval before incurring those
Yeah, and
expenses.
I'm just gonna throw something out here again, just math real quickly. And I'm rounding up to 50 cents to make it easy. For $350, that would be 700 miles. I want you to think about that. 700 miles. 700 miles in a month would be it's actually more than 700 if it's 44 cents, but nonetheless, if it was a full 50 cents, 700 miles would yield $350. I don't know where you drive in Leon County unless you're, an Uber driver at 700 miles. That's a lot of mileage. So it may be and I remember during those first couple of months, it would make sense, I guess, because there were so many of the community meetings and what have you. But all of that, I think, has been dialed back. So, okay. But just following the policy is just following the policy.
Right.
We include her in the policy.
So the reference I will include in the draft employment agreement then is something more along the line of she can claim reimbursement for in-county travel based on the existing policy of CSC.
Yeah.
And that is something I assume Chair Jones will discuss with her, or I can do so, either one. This is, after all, her contract is subject to negotiation by both sides. She might have some feedback once we let her know.
All right.
The second item that she only requested two things, right? The second item, I'm gonna jump out there on this. So this becomes like this craziness for me, and this is not reflective of my appreciation for Sika and her abilities. It is a recognition of the market and also the recognition of a package we put together for her that is unlike any other executive director in that we treat her as a senior manager in state government. And what I would say to the residents of Leon County, who I hope aren't listening to this because I hope they have better things to do with their time, but that if you think about living in Leon County and you have a job that pays you $128,000, plus you have a healthcare plan that pays you as a senior manager, which is our contribution is $40,000, $40,600 a year. So on top of a $128,000 salary, there's a $40,600 healthcare benefit. There's an $829 life insurance benefit, and then there is a retirement contribution of 31.57% of whatever salary we set. With her 128, it yields $40,646.38 every single year. That is real money. And that is not something that any of the comparison counties that are part of the chart receive. I don't.
How do you, so we provide her with a package different than any other CSC director in the state?
Yes, sir. And that actually is at my doing and my request when we signed the original contract with her to treat her as a senior manager in state government. that's how I saw the role as the executive director, and therefore that is how I wanted the position treated, and therefore everybody else. Well, I was able to convince everyone else to make the position a senior manager. At some point, when Sika retires, that $40,000, she gets a very nice retirement because of that $40,600 every single year that we contribute to her retirement, which Mr. Jones, as a county employee, I can tell you, not even close. I mean, it's much better, much richer than what a county employee would receive. And it is on the lines of everything other than elected officials in state government. So all agency heads, if you're the secretary of the Department of Children and Families, you're receiving the same retirement percentage that we've offered Mrs. Green.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Jones, did you have any feedback on the?
Yeah, because so what does, I don't even understand what Mr. Mitchell is explaining. Because of contract she presently has, she doesn't deserve to ever be compensated, get a raise?
No, I'm just suggesting that when you look at how well we're compensating her, she's essentially being compensated somewhere around $215,000 a year, living in Leon County, serving in the role of an executive director of a health and human service agency that has a $9 million a year budget. And I just think that how she's being compensated today is appropriate for the job she's in and the role that she's currently playing. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve a raise in the future, but when you take what she's making and you look at the scores she's received on her evaluation, and they're less favorable, still not troubling at all, but less favorable this year than they were last year, I'm just comfortable leaving the package as it is, but including her request for reimbursement for mileage that she actually is putting on her car.
Well, I disagree, and I will admit that I was not a part of the conversation that described that she would be treated as a state employee. I guess saw her as an extension of Leon County, because we were running our fiscal work or fiscal management at one time through this millage rate collection through Leon County. And Leon County this year gave all of its employees a 5% raise, to include myself.
Right.
And so I don't have a problem with her receiving a 5% raise. And also based upon her evaluation, I think the word that you used earlier was that she either met or exceeded expectation in every category. With that being the case, under ordinary circumstances, and I'm not talking about necessarily a merit-based raise, but she would still qualify. So I don't have a problem with that. And as for the package that she receives, she rightfully deserves to be insured, to have health insurance, because she is a manager and because she is an employee and she's not a 1099 employee. So all of those other things that we have added to her package are rightfully done. And so now we're talking about whether or not she should be considered for a raise. And what her current package is and what we're paying her is the issue of, does she deserve a raise? And unless there's a reason where we could not afford to provide the raise, based again upon the fact that she had a good evaluation, she hasn't received a raise in 2 years, and her contract is up for renewal, I think the time is right now for us to do it. And I would like for us to make that recommendation as an executive committee, and then the full board can vote it up or down. And my recommendation is 5%, similar to what the county, Leon County, is providing. The county gave 5%, and the city of Tallahassee gave 5% as well.
Right. So, thank you for that, Chair Jones. And, where I stand on, the particular matter, I mean, I looked at the attachment that, Council Rowe, sent that I was assuming gave kind of a breakdown of similar CSCs around the state, and that we often use comparable when we've made decisions around, certain things.
True.
So, yes, and so, when I looked at that, then also I had a chance to even just really kind of even compare and make sure I had a breakdown of the sizes of those communities, to see if even the work was equivalent, might be equivalent. I mean, right now, out of those, I think it was 5 counties that they sent, she is the second highest salary, out of all those counties. And, that's even above those folks who are getting a monthly allowance, on their salary as well. So I was wondering, I'm not in favor of a raise. I remember the discussions of the original salary, and that, the original salary discussion, was negotiated based on the FRS system, SMS, and, following some of the same opportunities that are allowed at state employees. So I think the salary is sufficient right now, but what I would recommend, to your point, is if there's an avenue from the executive committee, I don't know if we all have to agree to move the discussion over to the council, or if we can just agree that, we don't have an agreement amongst us that she should all get a raise, just to bring up the topic. Is that the way to do that?
I'm of the opinion that if, for example, at present it's 2-1, then there would be no recommendation coming from the executive committee.
Well, or the recommendation would be no raise.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. There would be no recommendation
Well,
for a raise.
yes, sir. But, well, there's a recommendation, but what Mr. Watts is saying, and Chair Jones, in the past, what we've done, and I think the vice chair is trying to be deferential to you in your position, is that instead of coming forward with a recommendation of no raise, which is how the vote would go, instead, we would vote to bring forward no recommendation, but that here was the essence of the conversation. And therefore, we're not prejudicing the board with a recommendation. Is that right, Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Does that make sense to you, Mr. Jones?
It does, but all right, that's fine. Because let me tell you what my only concern is. I would rather, based upon the executive committee's decision, go back to Ms. Green, make her aware, and then I just don't want.
Yes, I'm
not. I mean, I understand that all of our conversations are public, right? And to include the evaluation. But what I don't want to do is sit in a public meeting in her presence and argue back and forth about whether or not she deserves a raise.
So are you
and I would rather defer to her based upon our recommendation, and if we were to decide to bring it to the board for consideration, for it to be talked about by everyone, But otherwise, I would go with the executive committee's recommendation, and there would be no offer of a raise. We make her aware of that, and then we would proceed based upon that. Because let me tell you something, I couldn't imagine sitting there and having 9 people tell me whether I do or don't deserve a raise. That would be off-putting to me.
Chair Jones, let me ask Mr. Rowe to that recommendation. Is that something that we would have to do some type of vote here on, which is agree that we are not recommending a raise?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay,
So I want to try something,
Okay.
and you guys tell me if this sounds reasonable, if I can get a second, and I'm gonna make a motion. I'm gonna make a motion that we go with the policy as it relates to mileage reimbursement. We leave her compensation package exactly as it is for another 2-year period. However, at the end of, I'm messing up my years, 1 year from now, 2025, instead of waiting for 2 years to decide whether or not we would like to offer Mrs. Green a salary increase, have this discussion again 1 year from now, where she has, look, she's a senior manager. We could offer her at any point, but I'd like it to be a date certain in an executive committee meeting in December of 2025, where we would, as an executive committee, meet and determine whether or not we thought the board should consider a salary increase. So it's really a
And
delay.
that would be the recommendation coming from the executive committee to the full board, correct?
Yes, sir. So that's my motion. If it's seconded and approved, it would then go to the board as the executive committee's recommendation.
The way the agreement is written is that during the annual evaluation process, which occurs every year, she can be considered for the raise. So it's not required that she has to wait 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Last year.
And we will do an evaluation annually and not biannually. So at the time of her next evaluation,
It
it
would
can
come
be
up
considered
anyway.
again.
Yes, my bad. Yes, that is correct. I was sort of being redundant.
If that is the motion, I would second it.
Okay, so
Okay, yeah.
it basically is the increase or the including her in the mileage reimbursement program based on the state of Florida's mileage reimbursement rates, along with no increase in compensation, with the understanding that we will be coming back as an executive committee in December of 2025 to make a recommendation again, which would be just part of our policy anyway.
No, that will not preclude the full governing council at its meeting 2 weeks from today from considering
Anything else?
raise.
Right.
It's because of the nature of CSC Leon as a unit of local government, the negotiation, so to speak, between SECA and the council would take place in full view of the public. It would be off, as to Chair Jones' point, be awkward.
Right.
She's hearing no votes. She's attempting at the podium to justify a raise for herself. It's difficult for her too.
Right.
So
It's embarrassing.
I think if I recall correctly.
And I don't know, and we talk about comparisons of managers. They don't do it to Reese Gold. They don't do it to Vince Long, and we won't do it to Sika Green.
Well, but we have a recommendation. The recommendation would go in a packet to the full board. It would come up on the regular agenda.
Yes, I agree. I've even seconded it.
Right, and everybody would know, but to your point and to Mr. Jones's point, we don't need a huge public discussion over this. Obviously, you're right, anybody can.
I think that's the way it might have unfolded during her last contract renewal, she started at 120.
Right.
And when the new contract was entered into for the term, there was extensive discussion among the governing council, and it was decided, no, we're going to move her to 128.
That is correct.
Even though I don't think that was the recommendation of the committee at the time.
The recommendation of the committee was no recommendation. Right.
So where are we?
You have a
We are
motion and a
motion
second on the
and a
floor.
second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion passes. So with no further discussion on that, next is going to be next meeting date.
So we had talked about having one sometime in the spring of 2025. There's a couple of additional items, given that Director Green is not present with us today, that she'd like to have a meeting with the executive committee. So looking at dates potentially, probably not the first Thursday of January, given that is January 2nd, but looking in the spring. So if there's a recommendation.
So, Mr. Jones, I know you have regularly scheduled school board meetings, and I want to be, do we have the superintendent and the school board members in the county so that we're not?
Correct. So today's issue was an out-of-town conference, and it was
Yeah,
not a
we're both at the Florida School Board Association meeting, but Thursdays are always good because Tuesdays are county commission and school board meetings, and Wednesdays are city commission meetings, all of which I know I have to be in attendance at, and depending upon the agenda items, our director may very well have to be present as well. So that's why Thursday is always our safe day.
So I think the question would be, do you feel strongly to meet before the January council meeting, or can it occur after that?
Should probably, well,
It was Ms. Green who wanted it though, right?
Correct, but January 2nd is, like I said, the day after New Year's. We could certainly do it that day. She is not available on the 9th and has requested it not be on that day. And then the 16th is our regularly scheduled
I
meeting.
need to ask a question really quick.
Of course.
The contract though, right? Mr. Rowe is going to get back with executive Secret Green and discuss that. And if there's discrepancies, if there's a challenge or it has to come back to us, is that correct?
I would go back to the
Yes,
full council.
full council has to approve it, right?
But the change, is there another step where it has to come back to the executive committee though? No, after this, that's it. You're, okay, all right. So I think we can meet after.
Okay.
That's my suggestion.
I was going to suggest the January 23rd, but I am aware that that is the ELC's Color Me Blue, so we definitely want to avoid that.
Good for you for knowing that.
Yeah, and then the next one will actually be at the FACT Annual Conference, and so this does push us into that first week of February if everyone is open to February 6th, I believe. Let me just double check.
That's committee meetings, but the Thursday they'll all be gone.
And I'm happy to get with Mr. Jones and each of you individually to confirm if you don't have your schedule out that far, and that we can set that
Does it?
subsequently.
It works.
So just Mr. Jones, because it works
Okay.
for both of us.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll be good.
Okay,
And you're gonna send a calendar invite?
perfect.
All right.
I would like, no, it's March that we had our meeting early. Got it. Okay,
All right, we can move on to the next one, next meeting agenda. We have that covered.
so the two requests that we'd like to potentially suggest is one related to strategic planning and direct response. Well, I don't think it was in direct response to the comment by Councilmember Marsteller, but that was a piece of them. And then also to discuss staffing impacts, because we're now 6 months on from the last conversation around staffing. And so Director Green would like to report back to the executive committee on how's that going and some potential needs.
Okay,
I don't know if there's other agenda items.
Yep.
well, what was that, Vice Chair? Chair Jones?
You just got demoted.
No, nothing. I'm
Okay.
good.
Okay, all right, so we'll move on to the next thing, which is committee member comments. Anything from the team here?
I do hope that we will, and I apologize for not being there, But I do believe that it's important for us, potentially on a monthly basis, to be in conversation with the director as the executive committee. I think it's important just to know the way of work outside of our meetings. I think it's important, particularly as we navigate issues and schedules and plans, that where possible, we are all on the same page as we have our discussions with the larger body. And we're not always going to be, but I think having that heads up prior to the meeting to review, to even a discussion relative to the agenda, I'd like to share in that responsibility with the three of you as the executive committee with the director. And where possible is when we come back to meet again, we don't have to make that decision today without her. But I just think that goes a long way in terms of moving the agenda forward.
Chair Jones, I agree with you, and I think I may be reading into what Sika's request was, that we do meet again so that she could talk about things like staffing, so that the executive committee sort of has a flavor for what's going on prior to it being brought to the full board. So I think that's kind of consistent with what you're saying, and I'd be all for it.
Yeah, I think that's important. And like I said, what I love, what I appreciated about one of our council members' comments, the onus is also on us. And I think that starts with the executive committee of the council. And so when we talk about strategic plan and we talk about our pillars and we talk about our priorities, the good part about the executive committee we have now, actually, I'm the exception. All of you are all inaugural members. And that type of institutional knowledge, is that the right phrase? I think is important moving, when we talk about where we are, we can go back to the dots and we can go back to the people from Miami. What was it, the Q study or whatever it was they did? And so I think all of that helps to inform the work. I think we can also hash out things with our director in advance too, as we talk about bringing things to the full board. So I just think I think it will improve our way of work.
Okay, sounds good. Any other comments?
No.
May I make an announcement just to any viewers? Just want to apologize to anyone who is online expecting the Finance and Budget Committee. That will be starting immediate or as soon as this one can adjourns, and then we'll reconvene on a new link. So if you're here expecting Finance and Budget, that will begin momentarily. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I will
Move that we adjourn.
second. All right, thank you very
Mr.
much.
Mitchell,
Yes, sir, Mr. Jones.
who do you have present for finance?
I have Mr. Johnson, who is just outside coming in, and you. But the Superintendent Hannah could not be here. So we are going to run this more like a workshop, because remember the criteria that needs to be met for allowing you to vote telephonically or
I apologize, and I'm not looking at the agenda. What do we have?
We have the consideration of the settlement with
Diantia?
Scientia, I always mess up. We have a discussion and direction to staff as it relates to variances in the budget and that process, sort of a technical And then we have one more thing, and I'm flipping to that agenda.
Live local.
Oh, yeah, something that our general, counsel is going to raise about the Live Local Act. And it will be, we can live, we can live without a vote. If you would, we can't take a vote, because you're not physically here and Mr. Hannah's not physically here, so we don't have a physical, or, no, we don't.
We don't.
And we just have,
I just think we're-
hold
we
on,
are
and we
still-
just have 4 members, right?
Yes, sir, we have 4, so we would need,
So can we
3.
make certain that we address that the next time we come to the executive council, that we need to get a 5th?
well, but that would make it even harder. Because so we just need 3, and if we got 5, we'd still need 3. We need a majority physically present
Okay, because you're
Yeah.
evenly split
to
right now.
constitute a quorum, right? So, and this is fine, this is not problematic, and in fact, Mr. Hannah had alerted Holly and Sika ahead of time that he couldn't physically be here. We knew that you couldn't physically be here. It turns out we can still have a discussion, and we really don't need
I mean, there's.
to take a vote for all
That's
of the
fine.
items to make their way to the full council anyway.
All right, sounds good. Let's
But
go.
are you staying on? Do we need to hang up? Holly, do we need to hang up and start again, or is this the same line?
Gotta hang up and start.
Okay,
Yes.
Mr. Jones, have you sent Mr. Jones?
I have.
Very nice.
All right, thank you. I'll be right back.
All right,
Okay, so we are officially adjourned.
yes, we are.
Um,
Well, we
thank you.
were.
okay.
Trying to figure out where I'm.
Come on in.
Good, I don't see.
Oh,
Right
it's-
here, it's right here.
Yes, I just hadn't put it out yet.